Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. My name's Robert Parsons and my guest today is Noor Mir, who joins us from Washington in the United States. Thanks very much for being with us on the interview today. Noor Mir is the anti-drone campaign coordinator for CODEPINK, a women-initiated grassroots peace and social justice movement working to end US-funded wars and challenge militarism globally. Although Noor Mir is based in Washington, D.C., she comes originally from Pakistan, which may in part explain her passionate opposition to US drone policy. Pakistan's federally administered tribal areas on the border with Afghanistan have become the biggest target for US drone strikes anywhere in the world. Noor Mir, if we could just start off by talking a little bit about the organisation that you work for, CODEPINK, before we get into the issue of drones. Apart from the issue of drones, CODEPINK deals with an awful lot of issues.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. CODEPINK, as you mentioned, is a women's-initiated anti-war organization, which is why I joined it. It really helps to empower women that live in militarized zones, especially those occupied by U.S. forces all over the world. How it really started was during the invasion of Iraq, when our co-founders, Medea Benjamin and Jody Evans, held a vigil outside the White House to really call upon the U.S. government to rethink its decision to invade Iraq. Since then, we've had many campaigns related to the U.S. invasion of foreign lands. One of our biggest campaigns is the drone campaign, but we also have a Bring Our War Dollars Home campaign, which really talks about how much of U.S. taxpayers' money really goes into wars abroad and how we can rethink that and invest it instead in education, roads, and healthcare here in the U.S. In addition, we were very active with campaigning against the war in Syria very recently. And in addition to that, we also have campaigns around the issue of Israel and Palestine. And also we focus on issues that pop up like gun control, which is becoming a very, very important topic here in the U.S.
But Noor, your specific area is drone strategy, US drone strategy. You are completely in disagreement with it. The United States government says it's a core part of its strategy in the fight against terror. And even more than that, it says it's an effective strategy that is working. Why are you so strongly against that?
I think that there has been enough evidence against the United States that drones just don't work. Just last week on Tuesday, there were two reports that were released, one by the Human Rights Watch, which focused on the use of drones in Yemen, and another by Amnesty International that focused on the use of drones in Pakistan. And these two major human rights organizations concluded that while some drone strikes may be effective, there is enough evidence that when used improperly, they constitute war crimes. If you pick up the reports or go on the websites, you'll see very in-depth interviews with witnesses that have seen drone strikes upon their villages in places like Pakistan, and also people whose family has been slaughtered. There's one particularly compelling interview from a man named Rafiqur Rahman, whose 68-year-old mother was killed in Waziristan in Pakistan by a drone strike. And he said that when the drone strike struck, it seemed as though it was targeting her specifically. How will we ever know what a 68-year-old grandmother had to do with extremism or posed any sort of threat to the United States? And when we have evidence that something like that has happened, we really need to prosecute the people.
Sorry, if I could just interrupt you there, because there are two big issues that you're raising. One of them is the military one. Does it work? The United States government insists that it does work, that it's successfully degrading both the Pakistani and the Afghan Taliban. You disagree with it on that. The second one is the ethical issue. Is the United States acting within international law? Is what it's doing legal, ethical, and wise? The Obama administration, contrary to you, insists that everything it's doing is indeed legal, ethical, and wise. Why are you so sure that you're right and they're wrong?
Well, for the first one, I think that the most important component is that it's not eliminating terrorism. I think that is a false narrative that the U.S. is playing in order to validate an ongoing war on people that it has no idea about. For instance, you know, even the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif, was here last week and said that drones pose a major irritant in any sort of negotiations that the government could have to placate the Taliban and get them to think straight about what they're doing. The people who end up hurting are not the United States. It's innocent Pakistanis on the ground that end up being blown up by any sort of explosive that the Taliban plants on the streets and has on multiple
I'm sorry to interrupt you
occasions.
again, but just to put the position of the United States government, they would say they are doing everything in their power to avoid what they call collateral damage, that most of the people they're hitting are indeed members of the Taliban or Al-Qaeda or other militant organizations.
Definitely. That is something that we hear a lot about. But when you think about all the different investigative reports that have come out, they say that not more than 2 to 10% of the people that are hit are actually could be termed as terrorists.
I imagine the U.S. administration would dispute those figures, though, wouldn't it?
I completely imagine that they would. But interestingly enough, I urge everyone to also think about many of the drone operators that are coming out of the fold and talking now about their experiences operating drones. For instance, Brandon Bryant, who was just profiled in GQ magazine, was talking about how he operated drones for many years and gives very full descriptions of what the experience was like, and how once when they hit what was a target, he turned to his coworkers and said, well, you know, that looked like a child. And they said, oh, no, we're just going to say in the review that it was a dog. But when the review came out, it mentioned neither a dog nor a child, and nobody knew who that target was. And it's those ambiguities that we really need to look into and ask the question, what if that was a child? And why don't we care if it was? So I think that we should pay more attention to those stories now.
It's interesting that the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif, was in the United States recently, and he's taking what seems to be a significantly different position from many of his predecessors in the Pakistani leadership. On the surface, they took the position that, yes, we're opposed to US drone strategy inside Pakistan, but behind the scenes, they seem to have been, by and large at least, largely complicit in US drone strategy. Nawaz Sharif appears to be taking a completely different line altogether. He's saying no US drones in Pakistan. It's a violation of our territorial integrity. It must not happen. It does seem to be a significant shift.
Absolutely. I completely agree, and I have been very surprised at how forward he has been about his anti-drone stance. And I think that it's coming from someplace real. You know, we've had an onslaught of attacks on the ground from the Taliban in Pakistan, and many times they have cited drone strikes specifically as a reason. If, you know, regardless of who drone strikes kill, at the end of the day, it's creating an atmosphere of resentment against the United States that extends beyond the Taliban, that extends into the public consciousness and the public perception of the United States. And that's something that we really need to think critically about.
And this seems to be the point that Nawaz Sharif was making, that the US drone policy is complicating the position of the Pakistani government in its own struggle with militantism inside Pakistan, that instead of helping in the fight against terrorism, if you like, against the Taliban and others, the United States is complicating its task.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think that drone strikes are something that everybody talks about on their dinner tables in Pakistan, as how is the U.S. able to send these robots into our skies and violate national sovereignty and then not admit to when it kills innocent civilians. And this is something that everyone is outraged about, and that is something that is really shaping public opinion about the U.S.
But it is a fact, isn't it, Noor, that the number of drone strikes this year has been reduced quite significantly?
Yes, that is something that people have been talking about, is that there has been a reduction of drone strikes. And in addition to that, there has been a talk of handing over the drone program from the CIA to the Pentagon, which means that there would be a little more accountability and transparency. But I wouldn't be too hasty to claim that as a victory for anti-drone, anti-drone proponents and and people that are working for the movement. I think that
it
might just be...
But it's also the case, is it not, that John Kerry, the US Secretary of State, said back in August that the drone strategy in Pakistan was coming to an end?
I remember when he went to the U.S. to say that, and I feel as though to Pakistan to say that, and I feel like as though it's just a game. I feel as though he's just teasing us. I hope that that's the case. But I think it would be silly of us right now to think that that is the final decision. I think we need to wait and see what's actually going to happen.
So the argument is far from won yet, you think?
I think that we have come a long, long way. I was thinking about this morning, recapping the events of last week. The fact that we have just today a drone victim's entire family, including 3 little children, and the son of the victim here to talk to Congress and talk to the American people about what's going on and tell the truth, I think is a huge victory. I think that is truth-telling to its extreme.
Okay, Noor Mir, I'm afraid we're going to have to end it there. That's all we've got time for. Thanks very much for talking to us about a subject whose critical importance in the world today is set to grow even more in the years ahead. And thanks too to our viewers for watching this edition of The Interview on France 24. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, back to the newsroom.